Bismillah.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulihil Kareem ala sahbihi ajma'een. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And Ramadan Mubarak to all of you, although we're now into the, alhamdulillah, the blessed 10 days of forgiveness. Jazakallah khair for Yielders and National Zakat Foundation for the collaboration today. And the best way to put it into a title is investing in and beyond Ramadan, subhanAllah, is probably the way I would look at it. We are going to, over the next hour or so, and we might go longer than that depending on how many questions come through, look at halal and ethical investing with yielders and calculating zakat on your investments. And generally, if there are any questions about zakat with the National Zakat Foundation. Moving forward, I'm going to just introduce our guests, inshallah, and just a few house rules. First of all, if you can please keep your mics on mute, number one. Secondly, the chat bar on the side, as and when questions come into your head, just put them up there and we'll try and tackle them at the end of both presentations. We're going to get a presentation from Yielders first and then from National Zakat Foundation, and then we'll open it up to questions. So if you just try and, as I said, we've got over 50 people that are registered, inshallah, and no doubt some of them will join in. So 50 is quite a decent sized crowd. We won't have time to unmute the mics to take that many questions, but certainly on the chat, if you put your questions in, we'll try and take as many of those questions as possible. Let me first of all introduce our first speaker, Zishan Upheld, who's a CEO and a COO and co-founder of Yielders, alhamdulillah. He's a KYC AML specialist in financial services compliance consultant. Began his career in financial crime, working on one of the largest transformation projects in the city. MashaAllah is a strategic thinker with proven ability to deliver innovative and effective solutions that positively impact business performance. He has also designed, implemented process improvement strategies, operating models, and governance on a number of global investment banking projects. As part of his roles within global banks, he was able to study for his ACAMS, making him a certified anti-money laundering specialist. With his very unique skill set, he was able to encompass all he had learned within the banking sector and ensure Yielders minimizes its risk profile and aligns to all FCA requirements. And finally, he's got a keen interest in property development, as ensured he was able to develop stringent and compliant processes within Yielders' operating model. His overall objective is to ensure continued development of the platform and aid in identifying investment opportunities for all Yielders. So inshallah, I'm going to pass over to Jishan for the first presentation, inshallah. And as I said, if there's any questions, just put them to the side. And then we'll go on to the zakat, the element on investments in general. And then if you have any questions on that, we'll try and tackle all of them before the end of the webinar today. Jishan, assalamu alaikum, and jazakallah khair for joining us. Over to you. Bismillah.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you very much for the introduction. Much appreciated. I am just sharing my presentation on screen now. Hopefully everybody can see it. Thank you very much to NZF for organising this event today. I think it's a fantastic initiative and it's great to be discussing everything to do with zakat and halal investing as well during such a prestigious month. So thank you again. So Yielders. Yielders is actually the first FCA regulated Islamic fintech platform in the United Kingdom. Effectively, we simplify earnings from real estate in the UK. We've made investment into UK real estate accessible from as little as £100, simple via our award-winning platform, and assured with our 100% equity and asset-backed Sharia certified structures. We are the first FCA-regulated Islamic fintech of our kind. We've now accepted investment from over 20 different countries globally, and projected annualized returns on the real estate investment opportunities that we offer of around about 10% net per annum. Today, I'm just going to be talking to you a little bit about the business, how we've come about, how everything actually works, and giving you some examples of what investment opportunities that Yielders do actually look like, what they entail, and how simple it is for everybody to get involved. And we'll also obviously touch upon the zakat element of investments with us as well. So why do people invest, and specifically why do people invest into UK property? So generally it is a very stable and high performing asset class and has outperformed most indices in recent years. So if you look at the previous 30-year trajectory of real estate in the UK, generally we've got an upward curve and it is quite an unvolatile, steady investment opportunity. It allows people to have passive income from real estate and returns from rental income. So generally, if you think about a savings account in this country, for example, and obviously being Muslims in this country and across the world, we don't accept interest or riba with anything that we do. This is a way for people to effectively earn similar to how you would do with a savings bank account, but everything is backed by an asset, and the income that you are achieving from it is actual funds that people are paying for rental income. And if you look at the savings and interest rates at the moment in the UK, obviously based on what's happened recently, it's actually gone below the 1%. In comparison to our investment opportunities, where we're able to offer a 5 to 7% net return per annum. We quote everything in net figures as well. So this is everything associated with the investment opportunity that you receive as an income, with all the costs, fees, and taxes taken into account. Usually with other investment opportunities, you might see fantastic gross figures. What we have decided to do in view of transparent information that we provide to our investors is provide a net figure, so you know exactly what to expect from our investment opportunities. Our investment platform and the sorts of investments that we offer allow you to grow your wealth residually. So it's not something that you're actually having to actively manage or look after as you would if you were a buy-to-let landlord yourself. Generally, if you think of being a buy-to-let landlord in this country, you know, there's a lot of difficult avenues that you've got to explore, having a deposit, potentially going to a bank for financing, a leverage or a mortgage of some sort. And then comes the ongoing management of an actual asset throughout the life cycle of the property. We take all of that hard work away from you, and effectively you're able to manage your portfolio online via our award-winning platform. The platform also allows you to compound your returns. So most recently, we've had a direct debit feature added onto the platform, whereby you're able to continuously add funds to your e-wallet online, reinvest those funds, and continue to compound and grow your wealth over a number of years with the sorts of assets that we've got available for investment. We sort of categorize our investors in three main ways. We've got our everyday investors, where they invest from £100. This is generally what you will see when you log on to our platform at www.yielders.co.uk. These are the income generating rental properties. So as I've mentioned before, it's a way for you to effectively be a buy-to-let landlord without any of the hassle associated with it, generally yielding between 5 to 7% per annum. And you're able to actually start earning almost straight away. So from the moment that you invest, we have a month-end process where you will actually become the official shareholder. And from the following month, you will start to receive rental income on a monthly basis. We've paid out dividends on the first of every month, alhamdulillah, for now 46 months in a row and counting. So that's a wonderful statistic that we've continued to pay rent as if you're a landlord. You receive it on the first of every month, notified via the platform. We then have a group of investors called sophisticated investors. These are people who effectively may have other investment opportunities, maybe a buy-to-let landlord already, or invest in stocks and shares. They will invest from as little as £25,000 or as much as £25,000. But there are slightly different opportunities available to these types of investors, particularly around the pre-funding element, which I will touch upon, and also development projects that we have available to people as well. And then the final group of investors that we like to call high net worth or top yielders. These are minimum investments of £50,000. You obviously have to further qualify for this as you step through and hopefully following this, create a profile on our platform. You actually are presented with these three options when you do apply, and it gives you the option to choose and categorize yourself. Obviously, we are at hand as well should you have any questions in relation to how to categorize yourself going forward. So how does all of this work? It all sounds fantastic, and what we have done over the 5 years that we really have been a business is really streamline our processes and provide a very easy to use way to be involved in real estate. So we've got a team of analysts who identify and vet all of the opportunities which are presented to us, all of the real estate we do get, and believe me, it is quite a lot. We've got very, very stringent thresholds that each of these assets must go through, a governance process that they must pass, an investment committee which to understand exactly.
Why do I need to put a headset on?
Apologies, if you don't mind just staying on mute, if that's okay. Thank you. So yeah, our team of analysts will look at the opportunities which are presented to us and we'll analyze whether or not they are viable opportunities for us to be able to list. We then have a standardized process of creating limited company structures. These are SPVs, or special purpose vehicles. So each of the assets that we own are acquired within a SPV. We then have a network of high net worth individuals. So this was either the sophisticated or high net worth top yielder investors I was speaking about previously, that will use their funds to acquire the assets within the limited company structures that we create. This allows for ease of share transfers. So when we do come to list the asset onto the platform, it's very simple for us to be able to move the shares from an owner, a high net worth, across to the smaller retail investors. Prior to listing the platform, so at point number 4, we have now acquired the asset in a limited company structure. It is all governed by the legal documents that we have created, which are both FCA regulated sign off and also have gone under a Sharia audit. A rental agreement with a tier 1 tenancy arrangement is then applied to this. So we've got rental agreements anywhere between 3 to 5 years, whereby we're able to understand the amount of income that we're going to be projected to earn across this period of time, helping us minimize void periods and allowing us to maximize returns for our investors. So at point number 5 is when we have done all of the pre-work effectively that you would have to do should you be vetting and acquiring an asset yourself. But we've done all of that. It's now packaged up and listed onto our platform as an income generating asset at that point. So point number 5, when you will see it on the platform, it is already producing the income. So on a monthly basis, we're getting paid these returns. You decide how much you want to invest, how little you want to invest, how many times you would like to invest, and you're able to very easily, via our platform, invest into this piece of real estate and become an owner of shares within the business that the asset has been purchased. At that point, that really is all of the difficulty, if you will, that surrounds the platform for you as an investor. You know, a very simple process for you to sign up and invest. But other than that, you know, you are now an owner of shares within this property. And on a monthly basis, you will receive your income. You will receive an email to say that you've received your income. And that will happen for the entirety of the investment term that we have already outlined. It's a very simple, easy way for you to as I've already mentioned, earn residual income from a piece of real estate as if it was a savings account. A little bit of an example of a case study of an asset that we have previously acquired. It's gone through its 3-year term and we have now exited. I appreciate there's quite a lot of information to digest here. But effectively what you see on the left-hand side of the screen is the deal as if you would have seen it on the platform when it went live. So this was an investment term of 3 years. We projected 5.71% per annum in terms of a rental yield. And overall, it was a 37.5% return on your investment. So that, sorry, 39%, which was a combination of 3 years of rental income plus a conservative projection of what we would achieve when we sell the property after 3 years. Now, what you can see in the graphical representation on the left-hand side is what we had projected. So over 3 years, around about 18% net return. What we actually managed to achieve was a 19.89% return over the 3 years. And we conservatively projected an increase in value of 23%, but we'd actually managed to achieve a 35% appreciation in value. So this just goes to show over a 3-year term with the asset that we had, you know, we were able to purchase an asset below market value in an area where we felt there would be competitive capital appreciation, and we were actually able to overachieve rather than, as I've said before, presenting you with these gross headline figures that are unachievable. We presented very conservative stripped back net figures and actually overachieved on what we set out to do. So this is just an example of something that we're able to do. A lot of our other assets are close to coming towards the end of a term. So there are 2 which we hope to exit this year. And then there are a load of other assets that are in the middle of their 5-year term, which will exit as we progress. So this is just a view of a case study of something that we've had acquired, rental incomes have been produced, and we've now sold. So that actual 50%, 55% that we were able to achieve was then obviously shared with all of the investors that had invested with us at the time being. And this is very much the earlier element of what we did. So this asset went live very soon after we went live as a platform back in 2016, sorry, apologies. I touched upon the high net worth and development deals that we've also got available. This is a view of a deal that we've currently got going on. It's a development project up in Teesside University, a student development that we've got producing 21 student rooms. It's a £1.6 million raise that we've done, hoping to achieve a projected return of 14% over a shorter term period. Obviously, I think these are the sorts of things that we'd like to take, and if there's anyone interested in sort of the higher risk, higher reward type deals, we're happy to take conversation and questions on at a later date. So now, what does actually investing with yielders mean, and our pledge to you as a business? We're ethically minded, so investment opportunities in UK real estate fully authorised by the Financial Conduct Authority, and we're actually in a very unique space of being dual regulated. By dual regulated, I mean both from the Financial Conduct Authority, but we also have a Sharia authorization in line with our business. So we've had the business being reviewed and signed off by Sheikh Abu Isa, who issued the fatwa on the business when it first started. And we do have regular Sharia audits in line with the business. Now, what we decided to do at the very beginning of the business was make our business Sharia based and not Sharia compliant. What you'll find a lot in the Islamic finance industry is there are a lot of traditional financial structures which are legally changed and administered to become Sharia compliant. What we decided to do from the very beginning was be Sharia based, effectively have three very core simple principles in line with our faith and our religion to allow us to benefit everybody within the Islamic finance space. So these three core principles are obviously no sharing in riba or any interest. So none of our products have any leverage, mortgage or financial instrument associated with them whatsoever. Everything is done in cash, and all of the high net worth information that the deals that we present are all done cash. There's no leverage, no mortgages or no banks in sight of anything. Sharing in risk and reward. So our profit predominantly is pegged to our investors' profit. So we've got a 2.5% fee that we charge up front with any transaction, a 10% management fee which is deducted at source of the rental income. So as I've already mentioned, that's taken into account with the net figures provided, and a 15% profit share. So the majority of our profit is tied to the investor's profit. So only when we exercise and we're able to actually deliver on what we set out to, we will take 15% of the profit. And the third and final principle, simplified principle of really the Sharia and the Islamic finance element of what we do, is investing into an asset class which is not volatile in nature. So I've already mentioned over the last 30 to 40 years, there's been a general upward trend of real estate. Obviously, there are some macroeconomic conditions which do impact this, such as the 2008 financial crisis. However, what we see, there is a general upwards trend in relation to real estate, and there is a growth factor associated with it. So they really are the core principles behind why we classify ourselves as Sharia based. Very, very simple. We understand that there are a lot of Islamic finance terms which can be quite complicated and not as easy for people to understand. But what we decided to do was strip back all the complexities and make it very easy and simple for people to consume, to understand, and to really understand what is going on with regards to the investments that we offer. So obviously, as I mentioned, assets that are free from debt or leverage always. So none of our projects or any assets that we have on the platform have anything to do with any leverage. Rental incomes which are paid as dividends to your e-wallet on the 1st of every month. No hidden fees or charges. So as you said, everything is plain and simple for everybody to see. You understand everything that you're paying towards in relation to fees and returns. We've obviously got a diversified selection of properties which are regularly added to and regularly looked at in terms of what we have to offer. Clear, open and honest communication about what we do and how we do it. So you are constantly updated with all of the information that we may receive over the life cycle of your project, and we provide that information to everybody. So although it is a financial instrument and a financial investment, it's very easy and simple for us to be able to provide information to you via our platform, which makes communication and everything very easy. And we've also got a very friendly and attentive team who are always on hand all hours of the day to be able to answer any queries and questions should you have them in relation to your investment opportunity.
Fantastic. Jashan, Jazakallah khair. What I'll do is I'll take 3 questions
Sure.
up to 6 o'clock, and then we'll move on to Iqbal to talk about zakat on investments and general principles of zakat. So I think I've already got 3 questions, mashallah, but people can put more up there, and if we have time at the end, we'll take them. So first of all, question from Shamim Malik. It says that, do you purchase commercial or residential real estate?
Predominantly, all of the assets are residential in nature. The actual example that I did provide you had a commercial unit associated with it. So predominantly it is residential. However, you know, each of the assets that we do get presented are looked at from a basis of, you know, what is the viability of them? Do they work? And can we put them into our structures to be able to provide as an investment opportunity to investors? So it's not ever pigeonholed. We will look at everything and understand what is available to us.
Okay, Muhammad Rafiq says, question is, after the investment term, would they be sold or the term restarted?
So this is the beauty of what we're able to actually offer. You know, given current climate and where we're at, we have a very unknown sort of element to the real estate market at the moment. Now, with previous examples, there are set investment terms, so, you know, anywhere between 3 to 5 years. And the view is that when we reach the end of those investment terms, 6 months prior to the end of the asset maturing, we will have it revalued and we will begin the sale process. So we do attempt to sell all of the assets at the end of the investment term. However, given the current circumstances that we're in, should there be a downturn to the real estate market for whatever reason, rather than crystallizing a loss, we will reapply a lease agreement for another 1, 2, 3 years to allow people to continue to earn rental income for the foreseeable future until the market recovers, whereby we'll be able to achieve a sale value, which we believe is aligned to what was originally projected. So at the end of the day, the voting power is with the investors. So we will provide a recommendation, and dependent on what current market situation allows for, it's dependent on what the investors choose. So you are in complete control of your investment opportunity. We obviously will provide a recommendation based on what we know and understand the market to say, but it is purely down to an investor vote at the end of the day to say, right, we want to sell, or right, we want to hold on to the asset because we don't think we're going to achieve the achievable exit values.
Sure. What is the deal flow like for investors? Will there be enough properties as investor pool increases?
Yeah, so I mean, this has always been, I think, the biggest sort of difficulty for us to overcome as a business is being able to provide enough opportunities, which we do continue to do. So what we've actually done is partner with deal flow partners who are able to actually provide these sorts of deals for us. So we've got partners right across the country where we're able to provide deals to us almost on a daily basis, which we analyze and understand. The difficulty with it is because we have such high standards and such high thresholds associated with what we're trying to achieve, finding the deals that we offer really are almost, you know, one of a kind. So there is a lot of work that goes into the background of providing these. I think at the moment what you'll see on the platform, based on what we have decided to do, a message from the CEO when you do log on, there's a red banner across the platform, which is a COVID-19 update based on the current market situation. And, you know, I read a fantastic article from The Independent the other day that there's about £83 billion worth of real estate transactions currently on hold in the UK. And we followed suit around that. So as we don't understand what the market conditions currently are because of the current COVID situation, we've taken a view just to pause on any acquisitions at the moment, understand what the impact is going to be on the market before we begin starting to acquire assets again. So for the time being, what you'll see on the platform are some secondary market transactions. So these are people wanting to exit out of 3 to 5 year investment terms that we've got available. But any new assets currently at the moment are paused as we try and understand the impact of the current pandemic that we're facing.
Let's take one more question, then we'll move on to Iqbal to discuss zakat. Are there any transaction fees when putting money in and out of the wallet?
So what we have done is actually roll up all of the fees into the fund amount. So for example, if we acquire an asset for £100,000, we may actually list it for £110,000. This is all provided as a breakdown as a profit and loss for each of the assets that we've got. So within that £10,000, all of the legal fees, stamp duty, transactional fees, our fee, and any wallet fees are added into that. So when you're actually investing, the amount that you invest in, the returns associated with that have everything encompassed in it, which is why we're able to provide net returns associated with the level of funds that we have to collect.
Sure. Brilliant. Listen, we'll come back to you. if we have some more questions by the end of the webinar. Let's go on to Iqbal Naseem from the National Zakat Foundation. As CEO, Iqbal has led the National Zakat Foundation since it launched in 2011. Some amazing power that zakat has to change lives in the UK. Iqbal has seen that firsthand. He's spoken about zakat and National Zakat Foundation across the UK and internationally. He holds an MA in Economics and Management from Cambridge University, where he was president of the Islamic Society. He also holds an MSc in Voluntary Sector Management from Cass Business School before joining NZF. And he also was recognized in the Queen's Honours List, alhamdulillah, for his work in tackling poverty, subhanAllah. Iqbal worked in the investment banking in London for 5 years before joining NZF. And NZF is basically the only platform that collects within the UK and also distributes within the UK. So we're going to find out a bit more about that particular element. Assalamu alaikum, Iqbal. Welcome to our webinar.
Salam.
Investing beyond Ramadan, inshallah. Look, tell us a bit about an introduction to zakat in principle. You know, what is it all about? Because we're always, every year we forget, and most of us don't really know.
Sure. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and thanks for joining. So I'll just maybe detail a little bit in terms of, before we get on to calculation questions, just some of the key principles of zakat, the things that we need to really think about and be aware of in terms of what zakat actually is. So many of us are accustomed to thinking about zakat as obligatory charity. So we think about it in very much charitable terms, and then but we know it's an obligation. That obviously is a bit of a contradiction in terms. If you look at obviously charity in the English language, charity implies voluntary giving, right? It implies typical voluntary giving, often reactive, often spontaneous, not necessarily any particular sort of regulations or limits around it in terms of how much to give and how money is used. Whereas when you look at zakat, we know that zakat is an obligation. We know that it needs to be paid on an annual basis. We know that it's specifically calculated. It's not an emotional decision about how much zakat is due. Rather, it is very specifically calculated. We know that classically zakat was organized at a local authority or sort of a governmental political authority level. It was the job of whoever was politically in charge and the authority to actually organize zakat and to make sure that the collection and distribution was done properly. So this was a key aspect. And we also know that there are specified recipients of zakat, which Allah talks about in the Quran, not just those who are poor and needy, but talks about the administrators of zakat, which is interesting because obviously if Allah is saying, make sure you use some zakat to fund the administrative layer or the organizing layer, that also helps us to understand that this is something that He Himself intends for us to organize and not just conduct haphazardly. And then there are other categories in relation to other elements of social welfare and community development. And so when we think about zakat, it's really important to realize that zakat really in principle is a wealth tax. Nowadays, to talk about zakat as charity is problematic for the reasons that we've just discussed. Also to talk about it in the terms of being a tax is kind of problematic because it becomes confusing with other taxes that we are no doubt very fond of paying. And so one way to think about zakat as Muslims in this country or anywhere is like a membership fee for Club Islam. Yeah, it's something that you have to do if you're a Muslim and if you have the relevant amount of money. And after the Shahada, of course, Salah and Zakat are next. And Zakat represents that minimum sacrifice or contribution, financial contribution that we're making. Now, normally when you ask a group of people, well, what is the actual purpose or ultimate purpose, purpose of Zakat? A lot of talking today, so and not much water, as you can imagine. When you ask people about what the ultimate purpose of zakat is, people refer to the purification of wealth, or they refer to poverty alleviation, redistribution of wealth around society, purifying the self from greed and avarice. Now, all of these are components of zakat, but they're not actually not one of them represents what the ultimate purpose of zakat actually is. Now, if you take the principles that we spoke of already, in terms of zakat being more like a wealth tax, a duty that is supposed to be collectively organized, and then you look at actually what the point of zakat is supposed to be, and when we think about the phrase, zakat is a pillar of Islam, what we're saying is that zakat is much more than simply an individual act of obedient paying of one's duty to any cause anywhere that meets some conditions. Rather, it's a contribution by a believer to the future, to ameliorate, to improve the current as future situation of Islam and Muslims. It is in that way that zakat is a pillar of Islam, because the funds are used year in, year out to deal with the various concerns that affect us as Muslims and affect Islam itself. So when we say zakat is a pillar of Islam, it doesn't just mean that zakat is a pillar of Islam in the sense that you individually need to pay zakat as an individual obligation, but zakat is a pillar of Islam as well as the other pillars. It suggests that when these things are done properly, individually and together, that actually Islam itself as a phenomenon in society is upheld, is preserved, is maintained, is allowed to flourish. And that's a really important thing for us to think about, because then it reminds us or gets us to think a little bit more clearly around what we would propose to be three principles of effective zakat. If you look at Quranic guidance, prophetic guidance, the writings of scholars over centuries, there seem to be three key principles. Number one, as we've discussed, that zakat is done collectively. So even though there is no, in our context, a UK Muslim minority kind of community setting, even though there is no official political authority that's going to come and collect and distribute zakat for us in a way which aligns with the purpose of zakat, which is to advance and support the deen itself, it doesn't mean that we ourselves shouldn't make some effort to collaborate, work together, organize ourselves in order to facilitate this thing taking place in a proper manner. The problem at the moment is that there are thousands of organizations that collect and distribute zakat in all sorts of different ways, and individuals are torn between all sorts of different decisions about what they should do. Now, the point about doing something collectively is that even if individually you did something or you give zakat in a way that is supportive, right, to someone or some cause, if we all do that individually, it doesn't mean necessarily that the collective endeavor or that has been necessarily achieved in the best possible way, right? So we give the example, we spoke about it being a membership fee. So just imagine if you were, if you have been, maybe not currently, but if you have been a member of a gym, for example, you pay a membership fee because those fees are then collected, are used, and then organized by the management and spent on various things that are in the interest of members, right? And growing the membership. Now, if the gym basically, the management said, okay, listen, you need to pay the fee, but you go and spend it on whatever you feel you want to spend it on in the gym. So you might feel, okay, that's great. I've got autonomy now. I can do what I want to do, and I can make sure that I make a decision that makes sense for me. But collectively, we all agree that there is, all of a sudden, there is no club, right? Because it's just not going to function at a collective level. Think about council tax. If the council wrote to you and said, you know, you have to pay your council tax, you have to show that you've paid it. Pay it to anything that you think is beneficial for the lives of the people in this borough. And everybody goes off and does that. Yeah, so let's say every single person who pays currently in the way that they pay in any particular borough still pays the council tax, but they're all making individual autonomous decisions about what to do, where it should go. Again, collectively, that's going to be a disaster. And that's exactly what our situation is when it comes to Muslims and zakat and Islam. Because we all individually go and do it randomly, haphazardly, here, there, and everywhere, and it's scattered, you know, literally scattered all over the place every year, there's nothing coherent being achieved, right? As far as the future of Islam and Muslims is concerned, which is what zakat is supposed to achieve, or, you know, improve our circumstances in that way. So it's kind of haphazard and random, unfortunately. Whereas actually it's the sadaqah component, that which is the private charity, where there is then a degree to which some further degree of autonomy, etc., sits. So the first principle of effective zakat is that there should be some togetherness. And that's why National Zakat Foundation, one of the key reasons why National Zakat Foundation came about in the UK and now, alhamdulillah, in different countries around the world now, is to try to give some semblance of order to how zakat of a particular community is organized, that there is a collective sense in which we're all coming together and literally co-investing in the future of Islam and Muslims. So that's number one. Number two is that the idea of local, right? Just as the examples that we've given, right? Whether it's a membership fee, whether it's council tax, national taxation, right? And even classically speaking with zakat and scholarly recommendations with zakat, the local element of it is like a normal and natural element of it. just as you don't balk at the idea that your council spends your tax, council tax, for the benefit of the residents in this particular area, or a national taxation, we don't see it as a moral outrage that 99% of the government revenue is not spent on, supporting or alleviating poverty around the world. We don't see it as a problem, because we see it as reasonable that, well, this is where this cause needs, the interests of the people of the nation need to be supported. Similarly with zakat, even though there is such a thing as the global ummah, we all have our concentric circles at which our affairs as Muslims, okay, and the affairs of Islam are particular to the particular cultural, political, and other kind of parameters within which we're actually functioning normally in our lives. Mm. We live out our Islam and our being Muslim here. And the future of Islam and Muslims here is the one for which we have the greatest level of responsibility. And actually, if the Muslims around the world just organize themselves in this way, where basically the zakat was properly collected and distributed at the local level, right, and in those concentric circles, then needs would be taken care of.
Mind if everybody just to put themselves on mute, please?
The needs would be taken care of across the board. And we have significant needs here. And that's why local is a really, really critical part of it. Number one, because of the responsibility that we have. But number two, think of it like this. If we know that zakat is the right of the recipient, and so it doesn't matter what we do around the world with our giving. If it is the case, and it is the case, that there are thousands of Muslims in our midst who are eligible to receive zakat and be supported and are desperate and are in difficulty, right? And their development needs supporting and their empowerment needs supporting. And they have those needs. And there are clear gaps in terms of the provision that is available. Then if zakat is their right, then their right doesn't just suddenly go away because we've decided to go off and do something else. They still have a right upon us, and we still have an accountability in relation to them. Whereas we don't have an equal level of accountability to every single person on the planet, who might be in a struggle, in difficulty. So it moves us, it hurts us, it pains us. We don't forget the suffering, the difficulty, and we do what we can to support. But as far as zakat is concerned, it has a specific function, right, in terms of, and it needs to be seen in a lot more of a maybe dispassionate way than the way in which we typically see it. So local is important. And finally, as I've already referred to, is the kind of diverse nature of how we spend funds. It's not just about poverty alleviation. It's about economically empowering individuals. It's about supporting the individuals and the causes that will actually help deal with the challenges that face collectively Islam and Muslims at the current time. So I think wanted to really make sure, before I'm sure we're going to get onto calculation, and that's typically what people are interested in. What do I need to do right now? Yeah. We're going to get onto that, but it's really important that you appreciate what zakat is, that it isn't supposed to be an individual personal act of charity wherever you feel like doing it. It's supposed to be something where we come together, pool our funds and achieve something collectively. And so I just invite you to kind of really give that careful consideration, inshallah, when you're thinking about, basically where to give your zakat this year.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. But let's go on to the inevitable question of calculation principles and how to calculate my zakat.
Sure. So look, generally speaking, the first, and I'm happy to take questions, as they come up, because it's a relatively small group, so happy to respond to specific.
Open up the mics from now, because I wasn't sure whether the full.
Well, I think people can unmute themselves, right? If you want to come in. If you want to come in and ask some questions or put it in the chat, feel free. And
that's a question either for Iqbal or Zishan when we come to the end, inshallah. Take us through the principles first.
All right, fine. No, fair enough. Okay. So look, first of all, the first thing to appreciate, is that zakat is a balance sheet calculation, right? Snapshot point in time calculation, as opposed to being too concerned with the flows, right, during a year. So your sort of P&L and cash flow side of things is not as relevant as your balance sheet situation. And since it is a point in time calculation, the question is, well, which point in time? And so each of us should have a zakat anniversary. You should have a clear date in the lunar calendar on which you calculate and pay your zakat. Ideally. So especially the calculation, meaning there should be a fixed date in relation to which you make your calculation. And technically that day is also then your payment deadline, really. So you can pay zakat in advance of that day, right, to some level, but the reality is from a calculation standpoint, okay, and then you should calculate in relation to your affairs on that day and pay by that day. So whether if you're doing it in Ramadan, it's the first Ramadan, 27th Ramadan, whatever the date is, you should have a specific date. Don't just have it each year that I do it in Ramadan or this part of the year, but not have it specific in terms of the date. And then you assess your affairs on that day. Fundamentally, zakat is then due on your cash and your cash waiting to happen, if you like, that you have where you own assets, where you've bought assets or purchased assets with the intention of sale. Okay, so like a goods business, for example, a business person buys stock to sell stock, but then anything that you've bought to sell. So in the context of property, which obviously is relevant here potentially, that any property that you buy with intention of sale is subject to zakat, right? The property value, if you like, we start to think about the property value in relation to zakat. And obviously there are things to take care of in terms of the any liabilities that may be against that potentially, what have you. But in principle, the property value is subject to zakat. Whereas if you just buy to hold, or you're just buying buy to let, right? You have a property. You haven't bought the property with the sole intention of selling the property. It might be a mixed intention. Obviously, you want its value to increase. You're letting it out. You might using it as a second home, whatever it is. Then in this case, the value of the property itself is not subject to zakat. Okay. Even if at some stage you might intend to sell it, but that's not the sole and the fundamental reason as to why you bought it in the first place, then the property overall is not subject to zakat. So basically, capital funds or capital growth funds, as far as property is concerned, are kind of subject to zakat at their value, whereas kind of income funds, if you like, it's a different treatment. So cash, assets for sale, money that is owed to you, shares, obviously, then you need to think about shares in businesses. Again, if you've bought shares to sell, bought it with that trading kind of intention, then there's shares are subject to zakat at their market value. But if you've bought shares to hold, right, or again, portfolio diversification, or for some mix of intentions, it might be in an ISA, for example, then in this case, we won't be paying zakat on the entire value of the shares. However, what we do need to do is factor in to incorporate the fact that we have a stake in underlying businesses when we have invested in shares. So, and in these businesses, there is cash, there is assets for sale, etc. So as a shareholder of a business in which there is cash and assets for sale, receivables and what have you, where zakat is due, then if the management is not paying zakat on behalf of the shareholders, then we at least should pay our proportion. Now, if you have a single stock, that involves some sort of proxy assessment of the balance sheet of a company to make some sort of proxy of what the zakatable amount is. And typically it's a fraction of the zakat that you would be paying on the market value, right? Because you're looking now at the book value, the asset value, and some net asset value calculation. We recommend that if you have a portfolio of shares, that as a proxy, you can take 25% of the value of your shares and then apply the 2.5% to that. So that 25% represents a proxy for what proportion of the underlying assets in which you have investments are actually subject to zakat. That's broadly on the kind of the asset side. There are other things in terms of pensions and what have you. There's lots on our website with respect to that. So I'll leave maybe time open for questions, maybe if you want to ask further questions specifically.
Just before we do that, there are a couple of questions already coming in. Inshallah, I'll take them in a minute. Just quickly tell us a bit about what NZF is up to at the moment. What is the situation with COVID? Has there been an increase in the number? And actually that leads on to the first question as well. Are there, what is the zakat demand in the UK application for zakat funding?
Sure. So, so just to give you a sense of kind of sort of scale, well, in the last couple of years, we've been collecting and distributing approximately £3 to £3.5 million of zakat per annum. Prior to this sort of crisis, then in a normal month, we would, in a busy month would be maybe 800 up to 800 applications in a month. Yeah. So maybe, we're looking at 25 to 30 applications a day. So still significant. I mean, still once an hour, right? Somebody around the UK is getting in touch to.
That's based on people who know about NZF. Not many people where to turn to in some
Exactly, yeah. So that's actual kind of applications that we receive. Over the last month, so in April, we received 3,000 applications. Yeah, so alhamdulillah, it's good that we've been around to be there to receive that demand. On the other hand, of course, it's indicative of the fact that there is a significant significant increase then in need and reality of people's situations. It's proving difficult for people. And in terms of, so we've been now obviously collecting and distributing at a much higher rate over the last month. And it's presented some logistical challenges for us, but alhamdulillah, we're adapting to deal with that. And it means that really zakat payers need to come forward in greater numbers, because if this level of demand or need sustains itself for a few months down the line, which is likely to do so, then we need to be in a situation where we've got a lot more zakat to distribute. Otherwise, we'll be turning people away, which is obviously not something we want to do or we've had to do historically. So that's what the picture looks like roughly. We have different ways of supporting. So we have four.
That actually takes me nicely on to the next question, which is, you know what, the group's fantastic. They're just in line with each other, mashallah. Kalam Khani says that, can you tell us some stories or examples of people that you've helped and also, further improve their iman, because you mentioned zakat and, faith and link. And what about the different funds that you have? And again, give us some real life examples and stories.
Sure. I'll take the second one first. So just in terms of what I was going to come on to, which was in terms of the funds. So as of the start of this year, we've basically broken down the kind of giving options as well as the application options. So someone can now apply for a grant under 4 different funds: a hardship relief fund, housing fund, a work fund, and an education fund. Okay. So depending on what the need is, broadly speaking, these things are exactly what they, what the name suggests in terms of the type of support that is being provided. And similarly, when you give your zakat through NZF, you can decide how you want to balance your zakat across these different or weight your zakat, if you like, across these different priorities. So we have a recommended allocation, and then, but it's up to you in terms of how you would like to do that. In terms of stories, at the moment, basically all of the stories relate to pretty much people who are, struggling as a result of this particular crisis, and especially those people who've had an instant loss of income. So a lot of people who are self-employed and working on 0 hours contracts, literally overnight had a complete, sort of loss of income, and then so the visibility is completely gone down to 0. Typically, these are people who are not living on savings or have much savings. So I was actually just on the radio, on BBC Radio the other day, alongside one of our sort of beneficiaries. His name was Muhammad. He had a young family, 2 children, and he was he was a construction worker. So he said that, basically immediately the work dried up. He was told to go home. He'd put in an application for universal credit. But as you can appreciate, the numbers of people applying has gone like through the roof. He had built up some rent arrears, so he was struggling with that. So the universal credit was taking time to come through. So in the meantime, he applied through NZF. Alhamdulillah, we were able to manage to support him, to get some basic provision in terms of an immediate hardship relief grant to look at least the next month's worth of basics, as well as help him to clear up his rent and council tax arrears as well. Now, he mentioned in his interview the fact that he and his family were, without their utilities, basic utilities for a couple of days, right? And they also literally had literally no food in the house for 2-3 days, right? So the kids were just eating like sort of baby food maybe, but literally just had no food, like nothing to eat at the time. Now that sounds like something which is hard to believe, but it's a reality, and to be honest, it's been well documented. I mean, if you look at the news flow at the moment in terms of the extent of child poverty in the country, the extent to which people are really relying on food banks and suffering and in a great deal of difficulty, Muslims are disproportionately high as people in these statistics. There's statistics already to show that Muslims are disproportionately suffer a greater deal of deprivation and poverty in this country versus others, and then this crisis has really sort of tipped that over. So there's a number of different examples that we can give, but in the hardship relief side of things, especially, that's what we're talking about. It's very much like this bridge support. But, for lots of the people who are applying to us, there might be some governmental support coming through, but it just seems a very long way away at the moment. And what we're able to do is relatively quickly turn around some support so that they have that hope. And as mentioned in the question, just the last point I'll mention here, which is that, and I'm linking it back to what I said earlier, which is that the reason why Allah stipulates for us to make sure we give zakat to people who are poor and in difficulty in our midst the real reason, the ultimate reason, is so that their poverty doesn't become a basis of disconnection between them and the community of believers, and then between them and God himself. If you haven't been in this kind of circumstances before, it's hard to appreciate the faith eroding nature of ongoing trials and difficulties and poverty and what have you. And one of the ways in which zakah is a pillar of Islam is that Islam is preserved, right? More so when people who are in difficulty are supported by those who they approach in the name of Islam, if you like, or in the name of God. And when a Muslim presents themselves to their fellow Muslims, as Muslims are now doing to us on a daily basis in their dozens, then we need to be there for them. And then that us being there for them and giving zakah to them, it tells them that yes, there is a reality to this community that we call the Muslim community. There is such a thing as this kind of fraternity, or this, the bonds of sisterhood and brotherhood that we talk about, right? And so it's a very faith affirming, faith preserving thing. And many people, they report back about the fact that, their faith in Allah has increased, their connection with the community has increased. They become more conscientious believers themselves just because of what this support has provided. So the material support is meaningful, but what's a lot more meaningful is obviously what the kind of the faith preserving element, which I've just described.
Let's go back to the point about starting date. This is from Lima, mentions that in terms of having a start date or when to start calculating your zakat for the year, what is the best way to calculate this if you're unsure when you paid zakat the previous year?
Right, okay. So look, technically speaking, what it is that there's a certain threshold of wealth. When you come above this threshold for the first time in your life, when you're, of age, basically an adult, as far Islamically speaking, then that becomes your date, technically. And then a year, and then you don't pay zakah then, but a year on is when you then calculate and pay your zakah if you are, again, still above the threshold. Now, most of us have no recollection of when that was, but it's important if you have children growing up, maybe teenagers, whatever, to actually identify with your kids, like when that point in time was or is, and then to actually use that as their starting point, and then in a year's time on that same date they calculate. Now, if we don't know, we can arbitrarily select a date. So if we can't remember when we even paid zakah last year, should be able to find out. You look at your statements from a year ago, typically accessible. But if you really don't know, then just arbitrarily select a date, okay, and stick to that date going forward as your calculation and sort of payment deadline date. So the way to think about this zakah anniversary is like the last day of your Islamic financial year, right? You earn, you spend, you do what you do for a year. You come to this particular date, right? Before you now moving on to your next year, you calculate, you see where has Allah ended me up, basically, financially speaking. I make an assessment. I remove zakah from my wealth, which is, by the way, the purifying. When you purify your wealth, zakah is the impurity, right, in your wealth that you're removing, because for you, that zakah is now unlawful, impure. And therefore, you purify your wealth by removing zakah from your wealth and giving it elsewhere. So arbitrarily select one and stick to it going forward.
If there's any more questions, you can either unmute your mic or you just want to type it in. Zishan, if you want to unmute your mic as well, we're coming to the tail end of. Iqbal, there's another question for you from Shamim. Who decides whether money gets distributed? I know you're split in 3 ways from my experience, but who decides if another area is a legitimate zakat place of need?
Sure. So we have in various sort of scholars, we've always worked with scholars like from the beginning, to be honest. So various scholarly bodies, individuals over the years. Alhamdulillah, recently we've had like 2, based on this new model that we had 2 kind of fresh certifications by 2 scholarly bodies as well. So we obviously, now that we've developed a lot of internal kind of know-how, understanding, intelligence on the subject. So going forward, it's a matter of if we propose a certain fund to come about, or if we propose or if we think that there's clearly a need to spend zakah in a certain way, then that's something that we would then run by kind of internally as a management team. We would look at it, propose it to our board, and then propose it and alongside the sort of to the scholars that we are that we kind of liaise with. And then as long as there is felt to be a legitimacy for that and a need for that, then that's something that we could then bring on. For the time being, though, we don't feel. I mean, there's one aspect of work which we have paused temporarily, which isn't represented at the moment on our website, and we haven't spoken about it, which is a legal fund where we support with the legal costs, especially of asylum seekers looking to claim asylum, etc. So we for various reasons we temporarily suspended that this year. Something we're looking to potentially bring back post Ramadan, but that's, I mean, fairly non-contentious, to be honest. So yeah, if there's anything beyond, then we would then raise it in that way. But the model fundamentally at the moment is, you know, individuals are giving through NZF to other individuals to have these varying types of impact. And actually, when it comes to individuals helping individuals, as opposed to projects, you know, causes and these kinds of things, then it's a lot simpler, because there's a whole range of needs that obviously potentially we can look at and prioritize. But what we've tried to do as much as we can is mirror the way in which we've organized these funds to what we think is a relevant contextual interpretation of what the categories suggest. There's another one I see. Yeah.
There's another question. I've got another one from Facebook as well, because we are transmitting live on Facebook. So if anybody on Facebook's got a question, please share it. Our moderator will get that through as well. Questions again about halal investment, how to make it ethical, which is Shan, who spoke to us earlier, and of course Iqbal on zakat generally, on investments or otherwise. Question is there a transparency report we can see on the site? Where is the money spent?
Yeah, sure. So I'll actually just quickly just share my screen with you, and you can have a look. I'll just show you here. So hopefully you can see my screen. So this is our homepage. So basically, if you click on the menu and you do about NZF, so you can see here we've got policies and financials. So under policies, you can see our zakat distribution policy, and then these are the various certifications that we have at the moment from the Markaz al-Ifta wal-Qada, as well as the Islamic Sharia Council. And then in terms of financials, our annual reports are all here as well. So the annual report 2019, because our year end is December, so we've just literally just finished the audit process last month. And inshallah, post Ramadan, we'll release the 2019 annual report. But the previous annual reports are here. So if you click on 2018, for example, it's all there. They're all on the Charity Commission website anyway. And then we also provide, like, we try to provide a here, for example, these are the numbers. You know, we try to keep these updated at least on a monthly basis in terms of how much zakat is going out and coming in. So that's that. Sorry, how much zakat is going out at least, and we're looking to develop that further to basically show you know, have a sort of a zakat live page basically on the website, where you can see not just the outflows but the inflows, statistics, and just literally just live, just see what's happening. So that's something we're working on developing as well, inshallah, to give you you know, transparency, inshallah, and clarity in terms of what's going on.
Let me take my next question, which is from Facebook, and it's from Robina Kreshi. She says, can you please shed some light on zakat on pensions and the money owed by people where it's not expected to be paid back? So pensions and loans are the two questions. And then we'll go back to Lima here as well, inshallah.
All right. So loans, if someone owes you money, then you include the amount that they owe you in your calculation, because your asset, and they will deduct it from their calculation. If you have no confidence that they will,
yeah. What if I think I'm not going to get it back?
Yeah. If you don't think you're going to get it back, then you yeah. If you don't think you're going to get it back, the person who owes you money is now, you know, no longer taking your calls, you know, responding to your emails. Then you don't need to factor it in, basically. So, you know, as long as you're confident it will be returned, then you include it in your calculation as you go forward. In terms of pension, pension. So we say, look, zakat, consider zakat to be due on sort of these private pension schemes where you can't access the money, but there is a pot of money here that's being invested on your behalf. It's productive wealth. That's the point. So the point of accessibility, classically, when it's discussed, the point of accessibility is to do with, is it productive? Can you do anything with it? So here we have something, yes, it's in a wrapper that is not accessible. But the point is that, yeah, you should factor in the zakat on your pension. But again, it's not 2.5% of your whole pension pot. It will be in relation to what's the underlying investments. So on our website, again, in the calculator, depending on what kind of pension scheme it is, we have these proxies calculated based on analysis that we've done in terms of what proportion of your pension is subject to zakat. It's approximately between 20 to 30% on average. And then we try to make the payments as we go along. If liquidity is an issue, then you can consider paying, on monthly monthly installments in advance of your zakat anniversary, for example. That may help. Or you simply make a note of this is how much is owed. And when it does come to the point that you realize, or the pension matures and you realize you can access the funds, and then you can pay back for previous years at that stage. So that's how it would work.
Sure. Got two more questions. One is calculating zakat on gold. How do you decide the weight of the actual gold minus the stones, for instance? Can this be roughly calculated by looking at what we see as 60% gold, 40% stones?
That really very much depends on the item, and really what should be done is that a jeweler is the best person to make that assessment. So typically, I know currently that's probably not possible, but typically speaking, you would just take your gold to a jeweler and ask them to give you an estimate in terms of the weight proportions between the gold and other elements.
Okay. Let's take one more question, and if nothing else comes in, we'll try and summarize. Omar, he says, I'm currently living in Saudi Arabia. I've always given to NZF when I was in the UK. Should I continue to give to NZF, or do you feel I should support local projects here in Saudi?
No, it's an interesting question. So in principle, as we said, local zakat is what should be the case, right? But interestingly on this, it does bring up the other issue, which is that when we speak of local, right, and we speak about the future of Islam and Muslims or what have you, part of it also depends on, for example, where the individual feels they have an affinity and that sense of belonging in terms of or closest belonging as far as the affairs of Muslims are concerned. So we did this webinar a couple of weeks back with a fairly large group of expats living in Qatar, for example, and I was making the point to them that actually, I'm not sure whether they should be paying zakah through NZF if that's the optimal thing to be doing, or whether they should be doing it kind of obviously locally or in the region. And the sentiment was, but fine, we're here, but this is a temporary thing, and as we see our future and our children's future in the United Kingdom, and therefore that's where we feel that kind of closeness, that affinity, and therefore that's where we are kind of given. A lot of us we're working for maybe Western or UK companies just out here on secondments and blah blah blah, what have you, right? So there's this idea of okay, there's a level at which we feel aligned in terms of when I'm thinking about the future, where am I thinking about? What am I thinking about? So that's a consideration. So there is geographically is in principle what it should be, but so it would be reasonable for you to pay zakat obviously locally there, for those who are around you. But there is an argument to say that not just as far as the UK is concerned, but just generally speaking, if this is like a temporary stint that someone is taking abroad, for example, that in terms of their affinity and where they see the future, that's somewhere where they might give. I would just add one thing, which is that one powerful way to help NZF is to give sadaqah. When you give zakah through NZF, basically, right? Zakah goes through to whoever needs zakah, and then depending, again, it's up to you whether you are okay for a portion of that zakat to be used to support the direct costs of administration or to cover those costs in some other way. But actually support all our costs of technology investment, marketing, core costs, operational, finance processes, blah, blah, blah. All of this comes from non-zakah funds. So gift aid helps us with that. That's a healthy portion of that. But one of the things that helps us grow is the people who give us sadaqah, because so even though we have this kind of a strange or negative association with what we call, admin, right? It's actually one of the most powerful things to support, because look, the enabling, deeds and good things that we enable, are often more valuable than doing the thing directly yourself. So if you give sadaqah, and we use sadaqah, for example, if we use sadaqah to spend on marketing, for example, yeah, you might think, well, that's ridiculous. I don't want my sadaqah to be spent on marketing. That's the last thing I want it to be spent on. But if that marketing makes more people aware, and then for every pound of sadaqah, 5 to 10 pounds of zakah is being given as a result, which wouldn't otherwise have been given, but then all of a sudden it starts to make a lot of sense, right? And so that's what actually helps us, the backbone of the institution, supporting in that way. So that's something which also can be potentially considered.
Let's take one more question. Then the second question I've got is something that I think you can use in your summary, and also I'll get Zishan to say a few words as well on summarizing. So the last question I'm going to take just now, unless there's a flurry of questions coming in and people are happy to stay a bit longer. If I pay zakat on my pension retirement, does this mean upon withdrawal of my pension, it is inclusive of zakat because it's been paid, or do I need to pay zakat again on this money?
Yeah, no. So look, you stick with the zakat anniversary, right? So at one point in time, your anniversary will come, and on that day, the pension will be something that is accessible to you. But the way in which you will deal with the paying zakat at that time actually won't largely be different to how it is now. Because still at that point in time, yes, you might have accessibility, but whilst you're deciding what to access, how much to access, there is still going to be a current value of that pot. Yeah, a current value of that pot, and therefore calculation you can make in relation to the investment, in the investments that you have. So that stage is just a portfolio of investments that you basically have. It's still on go because it doesn't all just go straight to cash and it's just sitting there. So you don't need to pay, certainly, if you've been paying as you go along, you don't need to pay anything back for previous, but it's still an investment. So it's just like, for example, I've got gold this year, gold next year, gold the year after. Each year I pay zakat on the gold, right? So yeah.
And if obviously we're not going to be able to go through many more questions given time, but if people want more information, they want some calculation support, what's the best way to get that after this session today?
So the website really, nzf.org.uk, it's got a lot of information there on the calculation side. It shows you everything in terms of giving, what we're doing, the need that we're seeing as well, and that we're trying to service. There's an online calculator. You can submit a question. It's inshallah, you get a fast response in Ramadan. So everything is there available for you. I think it's one of the most comprehensive zakat resources out there, to be honest, if not the most, on the internet. So yeah, take full advantage of it, inshallah, and get in touch if we can help.
Alhamdulillah. Zishan, let's go to you to summarize. I mean, obviously we're living in very unprecedented times, a word that's been overused, I think, but also very relevant. What is the way forward for halal and ethical investing? What are yielders doing for the year ahead, inshallah, to cope with the current scenario we're in?
Inshallah. So I think, obviously, given the current situation, I touched upon it during my presentation about how we are in control, or our investors are effectively in control of their investment opportunities when investing with us. If you invest traditionally via a financial institution, you're always at the mercy of a bank. And if they decide at some point to hike up interest rates, or you're not able to afford your repayments, you're really very much at the mercy of your bank. What we've created and what we've been able to do is give back people the power effectively and control over their investment opportunities. As the shareholder of the shares within the business that owns the asset, you ultimately decide how you want to progress with our assets. That, it does make them recession proof somewhat, because rather than having to crystallize a loss and if there's a valuation that is provided that's less than what you bought in at, we don't have to ever sell. We're in control, and we can decide that we will hold on to an asset, wait for the market to recover, and continue to earn a steady, pretty strong rental income. And I think that for us makes us pretty recession proof in terms of where we're at, but also with new assets that we do acquire, being a cash heavy business and ready to acquire assets if there is a downturn at below market value, really puts us in a strong position going into the future. And obviously, we are facing unprecedented and uncertain times, but I think what we have provided is a mechanism for people to residually grow their wealth without any difficulty or involvement, and inshallah we'll continue to be able to provide that service.
Zishan, if anybody wants to get in touch with yielders, what's the best way to do that?
Again, very similarly to NZF, everything is very platform and website focused. So www.yielders.co.uk. All of the information is on there. We've made it very simple and easy to consume. We've even got our own blog in relation to zakat, in relation to your investments with us. So you can specifically look at what payments are due in relation to zakat with your investments with us. But yeah, everything is on the platform, and obviously across social media. Yielders UK, predominantly on Facebook, LinkedIn and Instagram.
Brilliant. And Iqbal, nicely, the last question, which will help you to summarize as well, is what is NZF doing for the future of Islam in the UK? And that should be the basis of your summary.
All right. Well, number one, we're I think, playing a key role, pivotal role in trying to organize this pillar, right? In trying to organize the pillar of zakat. And the argument is, as we discussed earlier, that when it's organized and it's localized, that's something that will be very, very powerful. You know, the zakat potential of this country is in the hundreds of millions of pounds at least, if every Muslim in this country paid zakat properly. Just imagine if, you know, much larger proportions of that were spent annually, year in, year out, to deal with the various things that are affecting us within the community, outside of the community, to help you know, our situation. We'd be a completely different community, would be looked at completely differently, and the reputation of Islam and Muslims would be a lot better and stronger than it is right now. And we would be a more confident and a more a community to which to aspire, basically, right? And the house of Islam, if you like, would stand firm and would be more beautiful, and people would hopefully be more inclined to it as well. And so what we're doing at the moment is, you know, as discussed, it's about making sure that individuals in our community who are in difficulty are supported, who have potential are allowed to unlock and release that potential. The people at the forefront in terms of our, you know, our kind of leadership, but those people who represent us, our future religious leaders and scholars, imams, etc., that where they require support as well for their development, their learning, that's also supported. So all of these are key processes. You know, we're just facilitating us to invest in people, right? We're just investing in people, and we are we've set something up where now, through your zakat, you can make that investment in each other, in your local, you know, into your fellow Muslims who are around you in the cities and towns around us in the UK, so that inshallah we can have a brighter future going forward. And in the absence of that, you know, you know, it would be a dire situation. I mean, actually, were it not for NZF being there right now, then the reality is that the vast majority of people who are applying to us for support and will receive support, like, wouldn't really know where to go as far as the Muslim community is concerned. So alhamdulillah, it hopefully represents hope and a positive for future, inshallah, for Islam and Muslims in this country.
And if people want to get more information about NZF,
yeah, nzf.org.uk. I'm sure we can find it. We're all over the place on social media and website, etc.
Jazakallah khair. Well, Jazakallah khair, Jishan and Iqbal, for leading on today's discussion about halal and ethical investments and investing in zakat, inshallah, for the future of prosperous. And it's a future for this life and the hereafter, subhanAllah, because, you know, investing in halal ethical is also not just about today, it's about tomorrow as well. And zakat, of course, is a duty upon us all. Jazakallah khair for my sisters Madina and Marwat for helping us to set this up over at Yielders, and Habub for looking after technology in the background. If you have got further questions from either, you can go to yielders.co.uk for halal and ethical investments. And for any issues or questions on zakat, go to nzf.org.uk. For myself, Naeem, and everybody else here, Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.